Welcome back to Rad Futures. Alan Collinge of studentloanjustice.org, author of The Student Loan Scam, the most oppressive debt in U.S. history and how we can fight back. Yeah.
Yeah. I always
Seriously.
forget to I always forget to plug the book. I don't know.
I was like, I feel like last time I plugged it or whatever, I didn't read it with much enthusiasm. So
That was far better. Thank you.
okay, so let's talk about this. There was recently, I mean, we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff, obviously, but there was recently a Wall Street Journal article that came out that said, I'll read the title just so people who are Googling can Google it for themselves. The average student loan defaulter is nearly 40 years old, right? Older student loan borrowers have been falling behind since the federal government ended its pandemic era payment pause. This article is written on May 12th, 2026, very recent, by Oyin Adedoyin. Okay,
That's right.
so what are your thoughts on this?
Well, that's a very important article. The backstory is this. We discovered that older people outnumber younger people. That's over 35 versus under 35.
Yeah.
Like 6 years ago in 2020. And we've worked with the whole 20 years we've been around, we worked with the media closely. And in the past 10 or 15 years, the media has become terrible, where even the most fundamental headlines, like what I just mentioned, older people outnumber younger people, they won't report it. And so we've been shouting from the rooftops about this fact for many years now, 6 years. It's gotten far, far worse today.
Yeah.
So this Wall Street Journal article is really the first mainstream media breaching of that headline. They didn't break the headline, and I'm told that they will soon, but we'll see. But you can't publish that sort of journalism and not naturally progress to the fact that older people now outnumber younger people.
Yeah.
Um, uh, there are far more people over the age of 50 than under the age of 25 with student loans. This is not a younger person's problem, which is what the mainstream media, that's their narrative, that's their
Mm.
go-to narrative. And they can't stand to see that narrative go away because it forces people to look at student loans in a completely different way. And so I thought that was really it was really important. And knock on wood, he's a kind of a younger reporter. I'm guardedly hopeful that finally the Wall Street Journal will pierce the veil and start telling some far the important
Yeah.
truth, not just that older people outnumber younger people, but many other unreported facts, provable facts
Yeah.
about the student loan program. One thing that's, and I'm going to share my screen here. I just want to take people through it quickly. It's really pretty interesting. Uh, um, so if you look, you can see in the pandemic, everything went to zero basically. And before the pandemic, it wasn't the oldest crowd that was delinquent the most. It was kind of a mix. But post COVID, you can see that it was very clearly the 40-year-olds and up that saw the highest delinquency rates. And that's really not something that we've ever seen before. The sort of conventional wisdom up until now has been that people who are going to default on their student loans, they're going to do it in the first 5 years.
Yeah.
That was the going wisdom on the street. I knew it was wrong, and now here we have clear and compelling evidence that defaults happen all through the borrower's lives. It doesn't, and it's very important also because the default rate that the colleges advertise is only the defaults that happen in the first 3 years after
Mm.
graduation.
Yeah.
So, and by the way, this New York Fed data is not great, but it does show trends very clearly. And this trend is unmistakable. We are seeing a wave of delinquency and default, the likes of which we've never seen before. And the lending system is failed. It's catastrophically failed by all rational metrics. this time last year, around 71 or 2% of federal student loan borrowers were not paying. And we would have expected that to go down a little bit as people ease into repayment, but no, that's gone up. So as of first quarter this year, 74.5%, so roughly 3 in 4 federal student loan borrowers are not able to make payments on their student loans.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure I probably said this last time, but the lending system is failed. It's in its death throes. There is no saving this lending program. I kind of think that the non-payment rate is going to go up even further. Defaults are going to go up much, much, much further. Some people who I respect and trust their opinion, who worked for the Department of Education, tell me they expect 20 million people to default on their loans by this time next year. And that's like 50%. So I don't even know what we're even talking about anymore, Jessica. This lending system, it's the Wild West out there. This thing is collapsing, and the Department of Education and the Treasury Department continue to pretend that this is a legitimate loan program, but by all rational metrics, it just isn't. And I think student loans are maybe in slow motion, but they've pretty much become a big national joke at this point.
And it's a scam. It's a scam.
Yeah.
It's being propped and kept alive Weekend at Bernie's style by propaganda.
That's right. And you mentioned that. It's really interesting. I think people are still looking at that graph. As you can see, after the pandemic, the delinquencies went up to like 20 something percent and in that range. And then it appears that the delinquencies went down a little bit just in the past like month or so, a couple months.
Yeah.
What's happening there, Jessica? And we'll know more. We'll be able to say for sure in a couple months. But I think what's happening there is the Department of Education, which was recently sued, by the way, for violations of the Fair Credit Reporting Act, because they were reporting everybody delinquent on their loans and illegally in many cases. They were sued. There's a very serious lawsuit against them now, and the credit reporting agencies for misreporting delinquencies.
And is that the one that was started by Wayne Johnson?
Yes, that is exactly. And by the way, if people out there saw their credit score tank and couldn't get through, the phone wait time was like 8 or 12 hours, and then they waited 8 or 12 hours, and then the call just dropped, and that sort of thing. They should really check out this lawsuit. It's studentloanlegalaction.org.
Yeah. And by the way, I'm sorry to interject. Wayne Johnson, sure, for those of you who don't know, is the former secretary.
He's the former, I think he was Undersecretary of Education, but more importantly, he was the Chief Operating Officer of federal student aid. He was a Trump appointee. He ran the federal student loan program
for the Department of Education. Yeah.
Yes.
He stepped down. He stepped down from his position. And one of the first things he did was he started talking about doing this lawsuit because he saw immediately that there was a moral failure. That there was not only a failure of governance, but a moral failure going on in the student loan business. So
yeah, that's right. And we're very lucky that there's at least one good person that is willing to tell the truth about what this lending program is doing to the country. Yeah. And so I hope that his lawsuit goes far. It's a very novel and compelling lawsuit. It's really based on a Supreme Court ruling in late 2024, which found federal agencies that are running lending programs like the SBA or Department of Transportation, others, they can be sued for violations of the Fair Credit Reporting Act. Mm-hmm. And this nonsense, this just completely bogus credit reporting that we saw as evidenced by this graph, that shows you the kind of damage they're doing to people. If they knock your credit score down by 100 points, that can cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars over 5-10 years.
Yeah.
they don't correct it. So it's a very good lawsuit. But the whole point of that was that I think that because of that lawsuit, I think the Department of Education and the credit reporting agencies are now reining back big time their delinquency reporting. And so I don't know where this graph is going to go from here, but it's very hard to trust any numbers at this point put out by the federal government
Yeah.
about the student loan program. And one other quick point about this graph. Another reason that it may have gone down a bit just in the past few months, they are coercing defaulted borrowers to rehabilitate or consolidate their loans out of default. It's a very terrible thing for people to do. Loan rehabilitations wind up defaulting again around 80% of the time, maybe even higher going forward,
Right.
because the numbers are just so outrageous anymore.
I mean,
But it is,
this is one of the things that's leading people to do some pretty horrific stuff, like we talked about in our last episode.
it absolutely is. It's a never-ending downward spiral. People fall into default and then they get coaxed into rehabilitating their loans. And then 9 months or a year later, they wind up defaulting again. And then all the penalties and fees get stacked onto their loan again. So, you can easily see a $30,000 loan turning into a $150,000 monstrosity with all
And
the collection costs, etc.
I want people who are listening to this and watching this to keep in mind that when we mention data, right, sometimes Alan will show data that he's pulled from the US Department of Education itself, sometimes different data. But when we mention the data around student loans, we often think, our sort of default pathways in our brain think and imagine of a single student loan borrower with this, generalized kind of $40,000, $45,000 student loan debt, right? That's what the department says is the average, which I think is total BS. Um, we often think of the single student loan borrower who does not have a family, does not have a spouse. We don't think of them as having children. We don't think of them as, having multiple payment obligations, right? We don't think of them as having mortgage payments. We don't think of them as, just being normal people. We think of charts and we think of numbers and we think of the single student loan borrower sort of fictitious kind of depiction in our head, whatever that is. But the fact of the matter is that I know several people, right? Several people who have student loans. They've borrowed, upwards of 50,000, some over 100,000, and they're married. They are married to each other, and both of them, right? We're talking about one household where both people in the same household are both student loan borrowers who are deeply in debt. Now, a lot of people also don't talk about the risks of getting married when you have this amount of debt, right? There are all kinds of risks that go along with that. So, this is something that really negatively affects people's ability to pay their mortgage on time. It really negatively affects their ability to buy everything that they need for their children. Because when you have people who've gotten married, they often have children, right? That's the way it goes. I mean, we're not just talking about, I think it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking, oh, it's one student loan borrower. Yeah, they might get married, but then they're just in their sort of problem of student loan debt singularly, all by themselves in this milieu of their social kind of, setting or whatever. No, we're talking about multiple people in the household. We're talking
Yeah,
about
that's right.
husbands
And
and wives, both, and then let's talk about husbands and wives who have student loan debt who also took out Parent Plus loan debt for their children.
right. Yeah, you
Deep.
can see how it compounds. These are not young people, young professionals making good living. That is not who most student loan borrowers are.
No, it's a fallacy.
I would guess that the average age of student loan borrowers has got to be somewhere around 45 years old or so. It's it's definitely, I would say, probably over 40 years old. These are normal people doing normal jobs by and large. The claim is that they make more money than others, but I haven't seen any real compelling evidence that that's true. They
No.
say, oh, if you get a college degree, you make $1 million more over your lifetime. That's completely faked up statistics.
Yeah.
So you could take a poll and find that people who took sailing lessons when they were younger probably earn around $3 million more than average over their lifetimes. Now, is that because they took sailing lessons?
Right.
No, it's because they grew up in a wealthy family who had a ton of money and they took sailing lessons. That had nothing to do with college. And so
And
there's so many misinterpretations of the data out there, and there's just so much, an overwhelming avalanche of misinformation purposely designed to make people think of student loan borrowers as these sort of young, irresponsible, oh, blue-haired liberal kids. That's exactly not true.
yeah, and yeah, it's
And by the way, another thing, like, people love to call student loan borrowers, oh, look at these deadbeats. These
mm,
deadbeats don't want to pay their loans. I
good.
am here to tell you that the federal government has gotten back in payments from the borrowers nearly every nickel that it has lent out. And in the meantime, it has managed to build up a portfolio of outstanding debt of $1.8 trillion, probably more. I think there's a lot that is not being reported. These people have paid, and many have paid. I can point you to people who borrowed 25,000, repaid, $75,000 over the past 20, 30 years, and they still owe more than they borrowed.
Yeah.
Um, in fact, and I hate to be throwing stats out like this, but people need to realize 85%, that's what, 4 out of 5, more than 4 out of 5 of all borrowers are hopelessly underwater on their loans. And before the pandemic, many were paying. But now I think all bets are off. I think the Department of Education is sitting on a mountain of dead garbage paper. They're not going to get their money. It's just not going to happen. And as the economy does what the economy is doing, and with AI taking all of, a bunch of jobs, and a lot of people say, particularly from young people, which really matters for student loans, but no, it doesn't matter. With so many jobs evaporating here now and over the next couple of years as AI really sinks its teeth in, I mean, in my humble opinion, I don't really understand why anybody even bothers or paying on their student loans. I know we never tell people to purposely default on their loans because the way the laws are arranged, the student loan industry loves defaults. They love to railroad people into loan rehabilitation and consolidating their loans out of default. They can make a
But
lot of money from the taxpayers doing that. But in my humble opinion, everybody should be doing whatever they can to not pay. Don't feed your real hard-earned money into this fake paper beast. It just makes no sense. We've got 30,000 people on our Facebook group, and I live on that group, and I'm a pretty good judge. We have very few people who are in their 20s on that group. I would say the average age of people on our group has got to be over 45 is my best guess. So yeah, this is not a kid's problem. This is also not a bad borrower problem.
right.
This is a bad lending system. These loans are weaponized. They've been stripped of essentially every meaningful consumer protection.
Yeah.
There are no bankruptcy rights for these loans, unlike every other loan in this country.
Let's
There
talk
are no,
about that. Let's talk
yeah,
about that. You released on X, I don't know, you've done it a few times here. You have a chart that you show, and it's all of the lack of consumer protections, right? Name all of the consumer protections that student loans do not have, because there's so many people out there who don't know this.
yeah, there's no bankruptcy rights. Unlike every other loan in this country, there's essentially no bankruptcy rights. The chances of getting your bankruptcy discharged on your student loans is like 1 in 40. It's
And
like,
bankruptcy is
no, sorry, it's less than
constitutionally
that. It's a half of 1%. So
constitutionally protected. Go on. I'm sorry.
yeah, the founders called for uniform bankruptcy rights ahead of every right in the Bill of Rights in the Constitution.
Yeah.
So that's the big one. But also statutes of limitations uniquely have been stripped from student loans. That makes the loans not only inescapable through bankruptcy, but also immortal. So they can follow you literally for the rest of your life on the debt. But there's even more. There's no fair debt collection practices. So a lot of our members are getting, people are calling their neighbors and their friends trying to track them down, collection companies. They're
Yeah.
making their life a living hell. And it's because they don't have to abide by fair debt collection laws.
They're gang stalkers. They harass people and they do so to the point where some of these people do horrible things. See
We've
our last episode.
I can point you to any number of very tragic, mortally tragic stories about people being hounded by collection companies. There's also no truth in lending laws for federal student loans. A lot of people don't realize the Department of Education is under no legal obligation to give you even the most basic, truth in lending items that credit card companies have to provide
Yeah.
and others.
Yeah.
And so, they go, oh, it's fine. How much can you pay a month? All right, well, you're going to pay this much for the rest of your life. And, the long and the short of all of the, also state usury laws do not apply to federal student loans. But the long and the short of this is that because these protections have been stripped, we are like a pinata that gives the lending people free reign to
Yeah.
abuse us, to cheat, to baffle and bamboozle us into default, to hyperinflate our loans, play any number of tricks, kick us out of the income-driven repayment plans, which a lot of people don't realize. Probably 90% of everybody who thinks they're going to make it through IBR, public service loan forgiveness, or even
They
the
don't.
new RAP plan, they will not get through. Their paperwork, they will be administratively screwed and disqualified out of those programs.
On that note, please, for those of you who are interested in this, what he just said, that 90% of the people applying for the PSLF and public service loan forgiveness, whatever, those programs, please see my interviews with Lisa Ansell. I have 2 of them on my channel. You can go look for them. Lisa Ansell.
Absolutely.
She
I
applied.
actually know Lisa, and I happen to know Lisa's paperwork got disqualified multiple times for things like literally not dotting her I for this, and also using the wrong color ink on her recertification forms.
Yeah.
So these are the sorts of things that the people at the Department of Education and their for-profit vulture contractors, these are the games they're going to be playing with everybody going forward. It's what they've always done.
Yep.
It's what they're doing now. And it is what they will always do. Do not trust any of these income-driven repayment plans. I mean, let the scales fall off of your eyes. Don't put on the rose-colored glasses. This is not at all a trustworthy program. It is, to me, it's essentially just a cheesy 2-bit rat trap that you would find on the shadowy side of Wall Street. These are basically mafia-like people who are doing everything they can, and they know the lending program has failed, but they are doing everything they can do right now to get you to sign on the dotted line. The Department of Education is totally shamelessly forcing people to make a choice between whatever program they're in now and the repayment assistance plan. And I don't even tell people ask that question all the time these days. Oh, what should I choose? Should I stay in my thing, or should I choose the RAP, or what should I do? It's a fool's dilemma. It's a false choice. It's a terrible choice. And even making that choice, even clicking on something or signing anything that somehow legitimizes the debt, in my humble opinion, is a mistake. In the 20 years I've been doing this, everything the Department of Education has ever put in front of people, whether, and they have rolled out 4 or 5 income-driven repayment plans since I've been doing this. Everything they put in front of you to sign almost always turns out to be a very bad mistake for you and a very lucrative proposition for them, shall I say.
If
This
they're
is not a fair lending system. It is a loan scam.
if they're telling the truth at all, right? I discovered personally that they falsely reported that I was delinquent on 1 or 2 of my loans to the credit reporting agencies. And I called them and I knew I wasn't because I keep meticulous, I pay attention, right? I always have and I always will. And I called them and I was like, this is a mistake. Like, I know for a fact that I'm not delinquent because I keep records of every time.
And maybe the first person you talk to will say, "Oh, that appears to be correct. Let me check into that," and you'll never hear back from them, or they'll just fob you off. And
Well,
then you call the next time, and often people hear a completely different story from whoever happens to be manning the phones the next time.
well,
There's,
I
yeah.
must have gotten lucky because I got someone and she said, okay, let me check into that. And it says, no, you're current. And I said, that's right, I'm current. That's right. Like, why are you reporting to the credit agency that I am negative? You know what I mean? Like that I have some kind of, I don't know. And
Well, hey,
she said,
you'd be a good candidate for that lawsuit. Maybe I should say it again: studentloanlegalaction.org.
yeah,
If Jessica's story resonates with you, the viewer, you definitely want to check that out. Yeah, the number of horror stories like what you suggest they're limitless. They're everywhere. And currently we're hearing from a lot of people who their loans were actually canceled, maybe through public service, maybe through something else, income contingent repayment, whatever. And now the collection companies are hounding them and the servicers are hounding them again. They go, no, 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 no. Your loan is not canceled. So
it's crazy.
it's the Wild West out there, Jessica. I mean, even trusting anything, a lot of our members, especially our older members, and I think this is reflected in that data that the Wall Street Journal reported. A lot of the older people are just like, you know what? Fuck you people, pardon my French.
Mm.
But no, we're done. We're done. Case closed.
Yeah.
Student loans no longer exist in my world, and you can go fuck yourselves. And that's what's happening
I,
increasingly.
I
And
think,
quite frankly, it should. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I think that this might qualify. I mean, I don't know how we'd qualify it. I guess we'd have to compare it to other, there are other regulation agencies that are totally captured, obviously. But in terms of corruption in the United States government, I would say that this particular department is possibly this could be, I don't know. Like I said, we'd have to dig around and find out and compare and contrast, but this could be the most corrupt program that exists within the US government at this moment in time.
I can't really speak for the Department of Defense. I've heard some horror stories with
That
that,
too.
but certainly the Department of Education is the envy of Washington. There is no other federal agency that makes a profit on doing what it does. And if you look at the personnel who typically run the federal student loan program, they are all sharks. They are all Wall Street sharks from the student loan industry, who try to take all their Wall Street lending tricks into the department, and very successfully do it into the Department of Education, and turn this thing into just a blood-sucking monstrosity. There is no public benefit. I mean, I'm sure the department has a mission statement to serve the public, but they have jettisoned all pretenses of serving the public, certainly with this federal student loan program, decades ago, since even well before I started looking at them. The corruption is mind numbing.
It is. And can I just interject something really quickly? I'm so sorry.
Sure, please.
Just given what we know, right? Given what we know since the Epstein files were released, particularly around public school education, what we know regarding the fact that the McGraw-Hill, right, which is like that provides a lot of curricula. It provides books, it provides various sorts of subject matter, specialty, courses and whatnot that cost public schools throughout the country millions and millions and millions of dollars every year, right? And they have both physical copies and now the digital world. So they have, their website, and I'm sure they're plugged into, various sorts of district sort of learning programs and whatnot. Now there's McGraw-Hill. There's also, and I'm only talking about like K through 12 education at the
Right.
moment.
There's also Pearson, if you're familiar with that.
There's also, is that Epstein related?
Well, Pearson, until recently, a huge educational book company for I think most
I
ages.
know Pearson, yeah.
Um, until recently, they were owned by Lynn Forrester de Rothschild. So she is married to, I think, the number one guy in the Rothschild banking family. Speaking of, these wealthy banking and other global concerns that people are so upset about. It's
Yes.
the financial elite in this country who
So
are making the most money from the Department of Education
and
and
and look at it, look at it, look at it. You go on X every day, I see education is failing. Public school education is at its worst, right? Reading scores and math scores are at their lowest in decades. We have so many kids that are failing right now. And if we just pause for a moment, okay, and look at the fact that there are ties, and people need to get real, right? There are ties between McGraw-Hill, owned by whom? Ghislaine Maxwell's father? Okay. There's
oh, is that right? Oh, yeah. It would
yeah,
not surprise me a bit.
it's her father that owns McGraw-Hill. Now you mentioned Pearson, owned by Rothschild.
Yes.
Then we have Life Touch Photography, which takes pictures in how many public schools throughout the country? Millions,
They've
right?
got like a monopoly, right?
They have a database of photographs of your children, and it's owned by an Epstein associate. Now,
Wow.
pull back, pull back. This is just this is just K through 12. Now, let's talk about college. Is it a stretch to think that perhaps those same people are somehow involved in the crippling of the American people who choose to educate themselves at the higher level? Is it?
It's no stretch at all. If you look at some of the people who own the largest for-profit colleges, for example, it's the Epstein crowd. Like, in fact, I think the owner of Apollo, who ran one of the largest for-profit college chains, I want to say may have been ITT, may have been DeVry. He paid Jeffrey Epstein like $130 million to do something for him to get him out of some sort of a legal jam. And I'm not going to go into too much detail because I'm not 100% clear. I don't want to get myself in trouble. But yes, these people are, and I can't name them all, obviously. It's a pretty big crowd, but it's not that big of a crowd. These are very wealthy people who are making huge amount of money by perpetuating these problems. We hear and we've heard about the problems in education since really my entire adult life. And the fact that they haven't been solved really means that there are some people at the top who really don't want them to be solved.
I also just want to say, any journalists who may be watching, or if you're watching and you know any investigative journalists, please implore them to do a deep dive into this issue and to try and follow the money. No one's really done that yet, as far as I know, in terms of who's really profiting from this? We just talked about the K through 12 education and how there are Epstein links and ties all throughout the curricula that they're offering and the life touch photographs and all of that. So if they're that deeply embedded, right, into the fabric of the country's public school education system, that should raise some red flags for everyone around the student loan debt issue, right? Um, like we've said before, it is a class war, really.
I couldn't agree more. And if it's very easy to look and see where the Department of Education spends its money. You can look at their most valuable contract. You can look at all of their contracts, and they're going to some very shady companies. They're going to a lot of, like just one example, Mathematica, Wolfram Research, which is, I guess you'd call them maybe an AI company. Many other psychological related research firms, collection companies is where they were spending the most money by far and away. But it doesn't, it only begins with the collection companies and the other sort of the Wall Street parasites.
Yeah.
I've got a pretty interesting graph. Goes far afield of student loans, actually, but people need to realize when we have problems that have been going on forever and they never get solved and our national debt keeps going up and up. Well, this is really interesting, in my humble opinion. If you look at the wealth of the top 1% of this country, and you compare that to the growth of the US national debt, you see something very interesting. You see a very close correlation. So everybody goes, oh, the national debt, we've got to do something about it. Oh, and they wring their hands. Well, look at the wealth of the top 1%. It is very closely patterned after the national debt. And
Mm.
over the past 1 to 2 years, we've seen that the wealth of the top 1% has accelerated even further as AI has come in and as, high value job tech layoffs and other things have been happening. But this kind of tells the broader picture, guys. Don't be a fool. There's certain people in this country who love government spending. And the Department of Education is, I would say, it's probably patient zero on that chart. Maybe the Department of Defense may be bigger, but yeah, guys, this is the game. And at the end of the day, not only are we as taxpayers being asked to pay for this, um, but in the case of student loans, the student loan borrowers are being asked to pay for massive increases in the cost of college, in the price of textbooks, and on and on and on down the line. Where does that money go? Well, I think it's pretty clear. But yeah, we need some good journalism, Jessica. The good journalists, certainly on the student loan issue, I can't even think of two right now, and neither of those are actually doing any active research currently. So
There's got
it's
to be somebody out there, right? There, especially I'm thinking because I'm a teacher, I'm thinking of K through 12 education. It's all correlated, right? Think about it, right? So we have public school systems that service districts, many of which are poor, right? Struggling financially, students who come from families that are embroiled in generational poverty, etc., and a host of other sort of social issues that combine to exacerbate the poverty problem, right? So,
That's right. And when you see, I don't know what the numbers are, but maybe $30,000 of government money being spent every year to educate these kids, there's a big big grift going on here, and that
there
money is
sure is.
absolutely not going where it needs to go.
There is, and we need to start connecting the dots around, okay, we know now because we do have people who've read some of the Epstein files, right? They obviously haven't released all of them, and we're still waiting for the rest of them, by the way. But what we have seen is that McGraw-Hill is deeply embedded within the US public school system. not only are we educating children using this curricula, profited by a pedophile, right? We pay millions, not just in one state alone. We're talking about all 50 states, right?
Yeah.
Millions and millions, not per state, but per district. We're talking about mind-blowing amounts of money, right?
Staggering amounts.
Going
Staggering amounts.
going to Ghislaine Maxwell's father, owner of McGraw-Hill Publishing. We're talking about money going to what's her name? Rothschild, who owns Pearson. We're talking about,
Who owned Pearson, but yeah, that's
yeah,
it's funny you mentioned the Epstein files, but it's really the Epstein class. And what's most interesting to me, Jessica, I don't know your politics. I hate both parties. I'm a nonpartisan.
nonpartisan. Yeah. Mhm.
Isn't it interesting to see these very right wing sort of, I would maybe even say borderline radical people from the deep south. These people probably never even went to college. They are as pissed as, I mean, this transcends party bounds. This is something, quite frankly, and look at people like Thomas Massey who have spit in the face of that and what's happening to them right now. This is pissing people off from all sides of this country, and
Yeah.
this is a very powerful thing. I could see something like this taking down both political parties because they're both involved. Let's not fool ourselves.
They are.
This is
Yeah, they
not a
are.
partisan thing, and
They are.
frankly, I think maybe that needs to happen because
It should. It
we've had
should.
enough. We've had
I mean, at this point, the Democrats are completely out of touch with, at this point, I don't even feel the Democrats represent real, actual Democrats in this country. I don't know anyone who
both
actually,
parties are two sides of the same coin, and
oh,
I suspect that eighty
yeah.
percent of the people in the country would agree with that statement.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's more, I don't know, the party of the CIA. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like, what are we doing, right? When Hillary Clinton ran again, it was like, what?
Close personal friend of Lynn Rothschild, by the way.
Oh, God, come on. Like, let's, do we want to go there? We can, I guess. Everybody knows, though. Everybody knows. We don't even have to talk about it because everybody knows, you know? Um,
I think that whole thing has run its course, though. I mean, just seeing the fury and anger. I mean, we're talking about pitchforks, and torches here,
yeah.
and I say the sooner the better because this thing has gone on way too long. This pilfering of the public treasury by the wealthy elites, everything, it's got to stop.
And it's, I hope people, I hope people wake up, man. It's like, it doesn't make any sense why there's not a bigger movement of people who are, I
I'm an
just,
independent guy, and whether I talk to liberals or people from the right, we almost always come to agreement on 80% of the stuff, and that's what this is. People just need to wake up and quit thinking of their neighbor as a blue or a red. That's all nonsense.
that's
It's
it. That's
it's
it.
really us against them, and by
It
them,
is.
in my case, it means the government, the wealthy elite, and the colleges. Uh, but I think we probably need to include Wall Street in there as well.
It's the Epstein class,
The
yes. And
Epstein class.
I love that chart that you showed. I think that that's a great little metric there that people can use and kind of help their minds wrap around what's really going on because
What's
it
really
does
going on? Yeah.
illustrate that interesting correlation, like you said. Look, what's really going on? Well, who's profiting? Who's profiting, right? I mean, um, the rich like to talk all the time about how bad socialism is and whatnot. I'm not, purporting to be any kind of socialist myself, but I do think that there are some helpful sort of things in all sorts of different, political sort of leanings that we can use to create a better system, right? There are failures and negative sorts of downsides to every sort of system, right? No matter which one we're going to talk about. So, um, I just, I
Yeah,
just,
I would just hope people out there don't let themselves be enslaved and trapped in the partisan divide,
yeah.
because that's exactly where the wealthy elite want us. They want us squabbling among each other, and just be smarter than that.
They do. They use things like the division of race, the division of gender, the division of sex, the division of,
Anywhere they can put a wedge.
oh, they'll even use class, right? I mean, it's like the middle class versus the poor. It's like,
Right, right.
no, we're pretty much beyond that point now, I think, where there's not much. I mean, there is a division, but there's a finer line now, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. I feel like journalists out there, please take this to heart. Please do deep dives. Please
I would
figure this
tell
out.
I would tell the young journalists out there right now, you are not relevant. You may be getting a paycheck, but you're not relevant because you're
Yeah.
not doing journalism. You're doing propaganda nonsense. And you should know that. Hopefully, they taught you something in J school. You need to turn over a new leaf. And if that means going out on your own and maybe getting a Substack and funding yourself that way, you owe it to yourself and to this country to do actual journalism.
I mean, it's the same in academic research, right? If you're any kind of an actual like researcher worth your salt, you're gonna investigate and evaluate every single peer-reviewed journal article that you come across. You're gonna look at their sources of funding. You're gonna consider, is the source of funding that funded this research project in any way profiting from the research that's been released by this team of researchers? I mean, there's all kinds of ways, right, that the rich or people in power can kind of do what Epstein did, right? He got his hands into MIT, he got his tentacles into Harvard, he got his tentacles into Stanford, right? You said a couple other ones, I think,
Yeah,
or you can
I
go
can
ahead.
point you. I can point you to any number of academics who have done heinously, shamelessly, completely, purposely poor, wrong, false, fraudulent research, and even published papers
Yeah.
about it, just for the sole purpose of perpetuating the student loan scam.
Yeah.
These people ought to be ashamed of themselves. But more than that, we need to be calling these people out, and people need to be angry. It's
Yeah.
time for the torches and pitchforks, I think.
Yeah, and if you're any kind of a journalist, be a good journalist. Be a good journalist, please. Just do your due diligence and be a good journalist. Don't be go
Yeah,
out
the
there,
truth.
and be a muckraker. Uh don't capitulate to the Bezos money, and
Yeah,
the
don't trade in your integrity for access. Access is fine. We have better public access to public records today than we've ever had. Uh, Start there, and then ask these people the tough questions. And if they don't answer the tough questions, well, then that's an even stronger part of your report. But the
yeah,
journalists have to modify their mode of behavior, because right now we don't have journalism, we have propaganda.
yeah, yeah. Alan, it's always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure, Jessica.
I we always end like I do feel, I mean, there is this despondency though, right? I mean, among all of us, right? Because all the borrowers are just like, it's a huge heavy weight. See our last episode. This is something that is very serious and it's going to get worse if it doesn't change.
Yeah,
Um,
maybe on a positive note, I would just say, hey, if you're sweating your student loans, remember 85% of everybody is sweating their student loans. We
yeah,
don't have to put up with this bullshit. The bad guys are far more afraid of us than we should be of them.
yeah,
We are 38 million distressed student loan borrowers. And when you owe the bank 10 grand, the bank owns you. When you owe the bank 1.8 trillion dollars, you own the bank. So don't
right.
forget that. All we need to do is fight a little bit, and we can knock this sucker out.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Alan.
Okay. Have a great weekend.
You too.